Before we begin this incredible account of courage in the Pacific Theater, tell us in the comments which city you are listening from today. We want to know where our listeners are joining us for this remarkable story of loyalty and survival. Now let us travel back to October 1944, when the United States Marine Corps was engaged in fierce combat across the islands of the Pacific. The Japanese Imperial Army defended every inch of territory with fanatical determination, turning volcanic islands into fortified death traps for American forces attempting to establish forward bases. The island of Peleliu had become one of the bloodiest battlegrounds in Marine Corps history. Operation Stalemate had begun in September, with predictions of a 3-day operation, but fierce Japanese resistance stretched the battle into weeks of brutal cave-to-cave fighting. The terrain consisted of jagged coral ridges, honeycombed with caves and tunnels where enemy soldiers could hide indefinitely. Marines faced intense heat, reaching 120 degrees, limited water supplies and constant sniper fire from hidden positions throughout the rocky landscape. Among the units fighting on Peleliu was the 5th Marine Regiment, tasked with clearing the northern ridges known as the Umur-Brogol Pocket. Corporal James Mitchell from Kentucky led a scout team responsible for mapping enemy positions before major assaults. Mitchell had trained with military working dogs at Camp Lejeune before deployment and understood their value in detecting ambushes. His assigned dog was a Doberman Pinscher named Sergeant Rex, donated to the Dogs for Defense program by a family in Ohio after rigorous health examinations and obedience training at specialized facilities. Rex had completed 12 weeks of advanced training, including silent commands, explosive detection, and messenger duties under simulated combat conditions. The Doberman proved exceptionally intelligent, learning hand signals within days and remaining calm during live ammunition exercises designed to desensitize dogs to battlefield noise. Mitchell bonded with Rex during transport across the Pacific, spending hours teaching the dog to recognize Japanese equipment smells and respond to whistle signals that carried farther than voice commands in combat situations. Their partnership became essential during night patrols when visibility dropped to 0. The 5th Regiment had suffered 40% casualties since landing on Peleliu 6 weeks earlier. Supply lines were stretched thin, and ammunition shortages forced Marines to salvage weapons from fallen Japanese soldiers. Communication equipment frequently failed due to coral dust and humidity, leaving squads isolated for days without contact with battalion headquarters. Mitchell's scout team operated independently, venturing deep into enemy-controlled ridges to gather intelligence about tunnel systems and artillery positions that threatened Marine advance units attempting to secure the island. On October 27th, Mitchell received orders to scout a ridge designated Hill 312, suspected of housing a Japanese command post. Intelligence indicated that enemy forces were massing for a major counterattack designed to push Marines back to the beaches and reclaim lost territory. Mitchell's team consisted of 4 Marines and Rex, carrying enough supplies for 3 days in hostile terrain. They departed at dawn, climbing treacherous coral formations while Rex moved ahead, his keen senses alert for ambushes or booby traps hidden along the narrow paths that wound through the volcanic rock toward the enemy positions. Mitchell's team ascended Hill 312 slowly, pausing every 50 yards to scan for enemy movement. The coral was sharp enough to shred boots and cut hands to ribbons, forcing Marines to wrap cloth around their palms for protection. Rex navigated the terrain effortlessly, his padded paws gripping the irregular surface better than human boots. Private Daniels carried the radio, attempting to maintain contact with battalion, but static filled the handset. Corporal Williams handled the Browning automatic rifle, providing firepower if the team encountered resistance during the reconnaissance mission. 2 hours into the climb, Rex stopped abruptly and dropped into a crouch, his training kicking in automatically. Mitchell recognized the alert signal and raised his fist, freezing the entire team in place. Rex's ears swiveled forward, focused on something ahead that human senses could not yet detect. Mitchell scanned the ridge through binoculars, but saw nothing except more coral formations and scraggly vegetation clinging to crevices in the rock. He signaled Rex forward with a hand gesture, and the Doberman crept ahead slowly, testing each step before committing his weight to the uncertain ground. Suddenly, rifle fire erupted from a cave entrance 30 yards ahead. Bullets ricocheted off coral around the team as Marines dove for cover behind rock formations. Williams returned fire with the bar, raking the cave entrance with sustained bursts that echoed across the ridge. Rex retreated to Mitchell's position, pressed low against the ground as trained, avoiding the crossfire. Mitchell threw 2 grenades toward the cave, the explosion sending coral fragments and dust into the air. The enemy fire ceased abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the team's heavy breathing and the distant sound of artillery. Mitchell signaled for the team to advance cautiously. They approached the cave entrance with weapons ready, finding 2 dead Japanese soldiers and a radio transmitter smashed by grenade shrapnel. Daniels searched the bodies, discovering maps showing defensive positions throughout the ridge system. The maps revealed an extensive tunnel network connecting dozens of caves, allowing Japanese forces to move unseen en masse for surprise attacks. Mitchell realized they had stumbled onto something significant, possibly the coordination center for the expected counterattack. He ordered Daniels to photograph the maps using the team's intelligence camera, issued specifically for documenting captured enemy materials. Before Daniels could finish photographing, machine gun fire erupted from multiple positions above them. The team had walked into a kill zone, with Japanese soldiers firing from concealed bunkers built into the ridge. Private Johnson took a round through his shoulder and collapsed, bleeding heavily. Mitchell dragged him behind cover while Williams laid down, suppressing fire. Rex barked once, a sharp warning that more enemies were approaching from behind, attempting to encircle the trapped Marines. The situation deteriorated rapidly as ammunition ran low, and Johnson's bleeding worsened, despite field dressings applied by Mitchell with shaking hands. Mitchell made a desperate decision. He ordered the team to retreat down the ridge while he and Rex provided covering fire. Williams protested, but obeyed when Mitchell pulled rank, taking Johnson and Daniels down the treacherous path toward Marine lines 2 miles away. Mitchell and Rex held their position behind a coral outcropping, firing at muzzle flashes from enemy positions. When his ammunition ran low, Mitchell prepared for a final stand, knowing that capture meant torture and execution. Rex stayed beside him, growling at the approaching enemy soldiers, whose voices echoed through the rocks as they closed in on the isolated Marine. Mitchell counted his remaining ammunition: 3 magazines for his M1 Garand and 4 grenades. Rex sensed his handler's desperation and pressed against his leg, offering comfort through physical contact. Japanese voices grew louder as soldiers moved through the tunnel system, emerging from multiple cave entrances to surround the lone Marine. Mitchell considered his options and realized that survival required finding an escape route through the ridge system. He whistled softly to Rex, signaling the dog to scout ahead for passages through the coral formations that might lead away from enemy concentrations. Rex disappeared into a narrow crevice between 2 massive coral shelves, moving silently despite the rough terrain. Mitchell waited, pressing himself against the rock and listening to enemy soldiers searching nearby caves. Minutes felt like hours until Rex returned, tugging gently on Mitchell's trouser leg and pulling him toward the crevice. Mitchell squeezed through the narrow opening, his equipment scraping against coral, and found himself in a natural tunnel that descended deeper into the ridge. Rex led the way through absolute darkness, navigating by scent and memory, while Mitchell followed with one hand on the dog's back. The tunnel opened into a larger cavern that smelled of dampness and decay. Mitchell risked using his flashlight briefly, revealing a space 20 feet across with multiple passages branching in different directions. Japanese voices echoed from the tunnel behind them, forcing Mitchell to make a quick decision about which passage to take. Rex sniffed each opening methodically, then selected the rightmost passage and started forward. Mitchell trusted the dog's instincts completely, following into another dark tunnel that twisted and descended for what felt like hundreds of yards through the volcanic rock beneath the ridge. After 30 minutes of stumbling through darkness, Rex stopped and began digging frantically at the tunnel floor. Mitchell knelt beside him, feeling loose dirt and debris rather than solid coral. He joined the dog in digging. His hands, striking something hard and metallic, buried a foot below the surface. Using his combat knife, Mitchell pried the object free, discovering a sealed Japanese ammunition case marked with military symbols. He opened the case carefully, finding not ammunition but documents, maps, and what appeared to be detailed attack plans written in Japanese characters he could not read but recognized as strategically important. Mitchell examined the documents using his flashlight, seeing detailed diagrams of Marine defensive positions, troop strengths, and supply routes. The maps showed planned infiltration paths and assembly points for what looked like a massive coordinated assault involving thousands of Japanese soldiers. The dates on the documents indicated the attack was scheduled for the following night, giving Marines less than 30 hours to prepare. Mitchell realized Rex had discovered something extraordinary, possibly buried by Japanese officers killed in earlier fighting or hidden for retrieval before a planned offensive. The information could save hundreds or thousands of Marine lives. Before Mitchell could secure the documents, Rex growled urgently and stared at the tunnel entrance behind them. Japanese soldiers had followed them into the cave system and were approaching rapidly. Mitchell stuffed the documents into his pack and moved deeper into the tunnel system, following Rex through increasingly narrow passages. The Doberman seemed to understand the urgency, moving faster through the darkness, while Mitchell struggled to keep pace. Behind them, flashlight beams swept through the tunnels, and Japanese voices shouted commands as the pursuit intensified through the underground maze beneath Peleliu's deadly ridges. Rex led Mitchell through a series of twisting passages that opened unexpectedly onto the ridge's eastern slope, far from where they had entered the cave system. Dawn was breaking, painting the Pacific Ocean orange and pink beyond the coral cliffs. Mitchell oriented himself using the coastline and realized they were half a mile from Marine lines, with open ground offering little cover from enemy observation posts. Rex panted heavily from exertion, his tongue hanging as he recovered from the underground marathon. Mitchell checked his compass and planned a route using the scattered coral formations as concealment from Japanese snipers. They moved carefully across the exposed terrain, dashing between cover points while Mitchell watched for enemy movement. Rex ranged ahead, checking each position before Mitchell advanced, their practiced teamwork functioning smoothly despite exhaustion and stress. Halfway across the open ground, rifle fire erupted from a hidden bunker, forcing Mitchell to dive behind a low coral wall. Bullets chipped the rock inches from his head as Rex sprinted to his position. Mitchell returned fire, seeing two Japanese soldiers manning a heavy machine gun, positioned to cover the approach to Marine lines, with devastating crossfire. Mitchell was pinned down with dwindling ammunition and no way to flank the bunker without exposing himself to certain death. He considered surrendering the documents and attempting to signal Marine positions, hoping someone would see and send help. Rex had different ideas. Before Mitchell could stop him, the Doberman sprinted toward the bunker at full speed, zigzagging to avoid the machine gun fire that kicked up dirt around his running form. The Japanese soldiers swung their weapon to track the dog, momentarily ignoring Mitchell, who seized the opportunity to throw his remaining grenades toward the bunker with desperate accuracy. The explosions silenced the machine gun permanently, but Mitchell could not see Rex through the smoke and dust. He called out desperately, breaking noise discipline for the first time during the mission. A bark answered from beyond the destroyed bunker, and Rex appeared limping but alive, his right front leg bleeding from shrapnel wounds. Mitchell rushed forward and examined the injury, finding it painful but not life-threatening if treated quickly. He tore strips from his shirt to bandage the leg, while Rex licked his face, tail wagging despite the pain. The explosion had alerted nearby Japanese positions and Marine observers simultaneously, setting off a chain reaction of events. Mortar fire began falling around Mitchell's position as Japanese forces attempted to eliminate the scout team that had penetrated their defensive zone. Simultaneously, Marine artillery responded to the explosions, targeting suspected enemy positions across the ridge. Mitchell and Rex were caught in the middle of an impromptu artillery duel, with shells landing closer each minute. Mitchell grabbed Rex carefully, cradling the injured dog against his chest, and ran toward Marine lines, visible 600 yards away. Machine gun fire from multiple Japanese positions tracked his movement, bullets snapping past his head as he sprinted with every remaining ounce of strength. What would you have done if you were trapped behind enemy lines with your loyal companion wounded and enemy soldiers closing in from all sides? Would you have left the dog to save yourself and the intelligence? Or would you have carried your friend no matter the cost? Tell us in the comments how you would have reacted in those desperate moments when every second counted and survival seemed impossible. Mitchell never considered abandoning Rex. Despite the tactical logic suggesting he could move faster alone and improve his chances of delivering the captured documents to headquarters before the planned Japanese attack. Mitchell ran 200 yards before his legs nearly gave out from exhaustion. Rex whimpered softly against his chest, the dog's weight making each step more difficult. Japanese fire intensified as enemy soldiers emerged from caves to pursue the escaping Marine. Bullets impacted the ground around Mitchell's boots, close enough that he felt the shock waves through the coral surface. He stumbled and fell hard, rolling to protect Rex from the impact. His rifle flew from his grip, landing 10 feet away beyond his immediate reach. Mitchell lay gasping for breath, expecting the final bullet to strike any second. Instead, concentrated rifle fire erupted from Marine positions ahead. A patrol had spotted Mitchell's desperate run and opened fire on the pursuing Japanese soldiers, forcing them to seek cover. Corporal Hayes led the relief patrol forward, his squad providing covering fire while 2 Marines reached Mitchell's position. They grabbed him under the arms and dragged him backward toward friendly lines, while others maintained suppressing fire on enemy positions. Mitchell clutched Rex tightly, refusing to release the dog, despite his rescuers urging him to leave the animal behind and move faster toward safety through the deadly crossfire. Within minutes, Mitchell and Rex were behind Marine defensive lines, where corpsmen immediately treated their injuries. The company medic examined Rex's shrapnel wound, cleaning and suturing it, while the Doberman remained remarkably calm despite the pain. Mitchell's hands were shredded from climbing coral, and he had multiple cuts across his arms and face. But his injuries were superficial compared to the valuable intelligence he carried. Captain Reynolds arrived demanding to know what Mitchell had discovered during the reconnaissance mission that justified such desperate measures and attracted so much enemy attention. Mitchell presented the captured documents and maps, explaining how Rex had found them buried in the cave system. Reynolds examined the papers briefly, before summoning the battalion intelligence officer, Lieutenant Yamamoto, a Nisei translator attached to the regiment. Yamamoto studied the documents for 15 minutes, his expression growing increasingly serious as he translated the contents. Finally, he looked up and confirmed Mitchell's assessment. These were operational orders for a massive Japanese counterattack scheduled to begin at 2200 hours the following night, coordinating 3,000 soldiers in a desperate attempt to reclaim the island. The documents detailed everything: assembly points, infiltration routes, artillery support coordinates, and even the passwords Japanese units would use to identify each other during the night attack. The plans revealed that Japanese commanders intended to mass forces in the tunnel systems beneath disputed ridges, then emerge simultaneously at multiple points to overwhelm Marine positions through surprise and numerical superiority. Without this intelligence, the attack would likely succeed in breaking Marine defensive lines and threatening the entire beachhead supply area. With advanced knowledge, Marines could prepare ambushes and position artillery to devastate the Japanese forces before they reached American positions. Reynolds immediately radioed division headquarters with the intelligence summary. Within 2 hours, the entire 5th Marine Regiment received orders repositioning units to counter the planned Japanese attack. Artillery batteries registered fire missions on the documented assembly points, and machine gun teams established interlocking fields of fire covering the infiltration routes. Combat engineers planted additional mines along approaches revealed in the captured maps. The Marines transformed from a defensive posture into a deadly trap, waiting to spring on the unsuspecting Japanese forces who believed their plans remained secret and their attack would achieve complete surprise. Mitchell and Rex rested in a field hospital tent while preparations continued throughout the Marine perimeter. The regimental surgeon examined Rex thoroughly, pronouncing the dog fit for duty after 24 hours recovery. Mitchell received a transfusion of plasma to combat dehydration and exhaustion, along with antibiotics to prevent infection in his numerous coral cuts. As he rested, staff officers visited repeatedly to ask detailed questions about the cave system layout, enemy troop movements, and exact locations where Japanese forces were observed. Mitchell answered every question, despite his exhaustion, contributing to the intelligence picture being assembled for the coming battle. Colonel Harris, the regimental commander, visited Mitchell personally that evening. The colonel explained that the captured intelligence represented the most significant tactical breakthrough since landing on Peleliu. Japanese forces had maintained operational security so effectively that Marine commanders possessed only vague estimates of enemy strength and intentions. The documents Mitchell recovered revealed not only the attack plan but also the total Japanese force disposition across the entire island, including units previously unknown to American intelligence. This information would reshape the entire campaign strategy and potentially save thousands of lives during the final push to secure Peleliu. Harris informed Mitchell that he would recommend him for the Navy Cross for exceptional valor and initiative during the reconnaissance mission. More importantly, the colonel authorized Mitchell to accompany his unit during the coming engagement, with Rex serving in his designated role as scout dog despite his injury. Mitchell accepted gratefully, knowing that staying in the rear area while his fellow Marines faced the enemy attack would be unbearable. He spent the remaining hours before the scheduled Japanese offensive checking his equipment and ensuring Rex was comfortable with fresh water and extra rations. As darkness fell on October 28, 1944, the 5th Marine Regiment stood ready in positions carefully selected to exploit the captured intelligence. Mitchell and Rex occupied a forward observation post overlooking one of the primary infiltration routes identified in the Japanese documents. Artillery forward observers shared the position, ready to call fire missions on prearranged coordinates. The night was moonless and quiet except for the distant sound of surf breaking against coral reefs. Mitchell could feel tension radiating from every Marine in the line as they waited for the attack they knew was coming because of the intelligence Rex had helped discover. At 2200 hours exactly, Japanese forces began emerging from cave entrances across the ridge system. Thousands of soldiers moved silently toward Marine positions, carrying explosives and automatic weapons for the surprise assault. They advanced confidently, believing their security had remained intact and that Americans suspected nothing. The Japanese troops reached points 50 yards from Marine lines before officers gave the signal to begin the final charge. 3,000 voices screamed battle cries simultaneously as the assault wave surged forward toward positions they expected to overrun through shock and overwhelming numbers concentrated against weak points in the defensive perimeter. Instead, they ran directly into the most devastating ambush in Pacific theater history. Marine artillery opened fire instantly, dropping shells precisely on the assembly points and infiltration routes documented in the captured plans. Machine guns, positioned along every approach, created intersecting fields of fire that cut down entire squads within seconds. Mortar teams illuminated the battlefield with star shells, turning night into day and exposing Japanese soldiers who expected to attack under cover of darkness. The carefully planned Japanese offensive disintegrated within 15 minutes, as coordinated Marine fire destroyed unit cohesion and turned advance into panicked retreat back toward the cave systems. The battle raged for 3 hours as Japanese commanders attempted to salvage their offensive by committing reserve forces to new attack routes. Every adjustment failed because Marine intelligence officers anticipated each move, using the captured documents as a roadmap to enemy thinking. Artillery devastated Japanese forces before they could mass for attacks, and Marine infantry counterattacked at precisely the moments when enemy units were most disorganized and vulnerable. By 0200 hours, the Japanese assault had collapsed completely with catastrophic losses. Over 1,500 enemy soldiers died in the failed offensive, while Marine casualties numbered fewer than 50 wounded. Mitchell and Rex remained at their observation post throughout the engagement, calling in adjustments for artillery fire missions that proved devastatingly accurate. The Doberman stayed alert despite his injury, several times detecting Japanese infiltrators attempting to flank Marine positions through unguarded draws and ravines. Mitchell's warnings allowed Marines to ambush these infiltration attempts before they threatened command posts or supply areas. When dawn broke over the blood-soaked coral ridges, the extent of the Japanese defeat became obvious. Bodies littered the approaches to Marine lines, and the enemy forces had lost their capacity for organized offensive operations. Division intelligence officers arrived at Mitchell's position after sunrise to thank him personally for the intelligence coup that enabled the decisive victory. They explained that interrogation of captured Japanese soldiers confirmed the complete surprise Marines had achieved by knowing enemy plans in advance. Japanese commanders had believed their security was perfect and could not understand how Americans had anticipated their every move. The psychological impact of the failed offensive shattered Japanese morale across the entire island, leading to increased surrenders and reduced resistance during subsequent Marine advances through the remaining enemy-held territory. Mitchell requested permission to return to his unit's rest area with Rex, both needing sleep after 48 hours of continuous operations. The request was granted immediately, and they walked back through Marine lines receiving congratulations and backslaps from dozens of Marines who understood that their survival was owed to the intelligence that prevented a surprise attack. Rex limped beside Mitchell, accepting treats and attention from grateful soldiers who recognized the Doberman's critical role in the discovery that saved their lives. The bond between military working dogs and infantry Marines deepened throughout the regiment that day. The victory transformed the tactical situation on Peleliu. Japanese forces remained confined to the northern ridges, but lost the initiative permanently. Marine commanders used the captured documents to identify tunnel systems that were systematically destroyed using demolition charges and flamethrowers. Remaining enemy soldiers faced starvation as Marines interdicted supply routes documented in the papers Rex had found. The operation that was predicted to last 3 days finally ended in late November, with organized Japanese resistance collapsing after the failed October offensive. Military historians later identified the discovery of the attack plans as the turning point that broke the deadlock. Mitchell and Rex returned to combat operations within a week, continuing their scout duties through the final phase of the Peleliu campaign. They participated in the reduction of the Umur-Brogol pocket, where the last organized Japanese forces held out in caves and bunkers. Rex's detection abilities saved Marine lives repeatedly by identifying booby traps and concealed enemy positions before infantry units walked into ambushes. By the time the island was declared secure, Mitchell and Rex had become legendary within the 5th Marine Regiment, their partnership representing the ideal of human-animal cooperation that made military working dogs invaluable in Pacific combat operations. Following Peleliu's capture, the 5th Marine Regiment withdrew to Pavuvu for rest and refit in December 1944. Mitchell and Rex traveled with the unit, boarding landing craft that returned them to the rear area base established on the small island. The regiment had suffered over 60% casualties during the 3-month campaign, requiring substantial replacements and equipment. Mitchell received his Navy Cross during a ceremony attended by Division Commander General Rupertus, who specifically mentioned Rex's contribution to the intelligence breakthrough. The citation described Mitchell's actions as exemplifying the highest traditions of Marine Corps service. Rex received recognition through a specially commissioned collar bearing his name, rank, and unit designation. The ceremony marked one of the first times a military working dog received formal recognition for combat actions in the Pacific Theater. Photographers documented the event for military publications and civilian newspapers back in the United States, where the story of the Doberman who found the buried intelligence plans captured public imagination. The Marine Corps used the story in recruiting materials and war bond drives, highlighting the contributions of dogs donated through the Dogs for Defense program to military operations. During the rest period on Pavuvu, Mitchell volunteered to help train newly arrived war dog teams being integrated into Marine units, preparing for future operations. He emphasized the importance of absolute trust between handler and dog, explaining that Rex had saved his life multiple times by acting on instincts and training when human senses failed. Mitchell developed training scenarios based on his Peleliu experiences, teaching handlers to recognize various alert signals and respond appropriately. His practical insights improved training protocols across the Marine Corps War Dog program, benefiting hundreds of subsequent handler dog teams. Mitchell also corresponded with Rex's original family in Ohio, writing detailed letters about the dog's service and heroism. The family had donated Rex reluctantly, motivated by patriotic duty, but worried about the dog's welfare in combat. Mitchell's letters reassured them that Rex was well cared for and making significant contributions to the war effort. The family saved every letter, later donating them to the National World War II Museum, where they became part of the military working dog collection, documenting the animal's service during the conflict and their handler's dedication. In February 1945, Mitchell and Rex received orders for the upcoming invasion of Okinawa, the final major amphibious operation before the planned invasion of Japan itself. The 5th Marine Regiment would participate in the initial landings, with scout teams like Mitchell's responsible for identifying enemy defensive positions during the advance inland. Mitchell spent weeks preparing Rex for the operation, conducting refresher training on mine detection and silent communication. The Doberman remained enthusiastic, despite being older and carrying scars from Peleliu, his dedication to duty undiminished by previous combat experiences and injuries. The Okinawa invasion began on April 1, 1945, with Mitchell and Rex landing in the 5th wave after initial resistance proved lighter than expected. Japanese forces had withdrawn from the beaches to prepare defensive positions inland, planning to fight a prolonged battle of attrition. Mitchell's team operated continuously during the first week, mapping enemy positions and identifying artillery concentrations. Rex performed brilliantly, detecting numerous mines and booby traps that would have killed Marines advancing through villages and agricultural areas. Their partnership continued saving lives as the bloody campaign ground forward through spring toward its eventual conclusion in late June. The Okinawa campaign lasted 82 days, becoming the bloodiest battle of the Pacific War. Mitchell and Rex survived, despite numerous close calls during cave assaults and defensive stands against Japanese counterattacks. By the time the island was declared secure on June 21, 1945, both were exhausted physically and emotionally from months of sustained combat operations. The 5th Marine Regiment had been rebuilt twice during the fighting as casualties mounted, but Mitchell and Rex remained among the original Peleliu veterans, still serving with their units at war's end. Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945, brought relief and celebration throughout the Marine Corps. Mitchell was on Okinawa when news arrived, and he immediately sought out Rex to share the moment. The Doberman seemed to sense the change in atmosphere as Marines celebrated around them, his tail wagging as Mitchell hugged him and whispered that they had survived and would go home together. The question of Rex's future became immediate as the military began planning demobilization and the return of hundreds of thousands of service members to civilian life. Marine Corps policy required that war dogs be evaluated for return to civilian life or retention for peacetime service. Rex underwent behavioral assessment by military veterinarians who determined he was suitable for civilian adoption despite combat experience. Mitchell immediately submitted paperwork to adopt Rex officially, arguing that their bond made separation unthinkable after 2 years of continuous service together. The request was approved within weeks, and Mitchell received orders to return stateside with Rex in September 1945 for separation processing and transition to veteran status. They traveled by transport ship to San Diego, arriving to crowds of civilians celebrating returning veterans. Mitchell processed through separation procedures, while Rex remained in kennel facilities at Camp Pendleton, awaiting final demobilization paperwork. The bureaucratic process took 3 weeks, during which Mitchell visited Rex daily and began planning their civilian life together. He intended to return to Kentucky and use GI Bill benefits to attend college, studying veterinary medicine with the goal of working with military working dogs as a civilian specialist, supporting training programs. In October 1945, Mitchell and Rex officially separated from Marine Corps service. They traveled by train across the country to Kentucky, watching America pass by the windows as they journeyed toward home and peace. Mitchell's family welcomed them both, having followed Rex's exploits through Mitchell's letters and newspaper articles about the intelligence discovery on Peleliu. Rex adapted quickly to farm life, though he remained alert and protective, his military training never completely fading, despite the absence of combat threats in rural Kentucky's peaceful environment. Mitchell enrolled at the University of Kentucky in January 1946, beginning pre-veterinary studies while working part-time at a local veterinary clinic. Rex accompanied him everywhere, becoming a campus fixture and living example of military working dog capabilities. Mitchell gave frequent presentations about war dogs to civic groups and schools, using Rex to demonstrate obedience and detection techniques while explaining the Dogs for Defense program's importance. These presentations inspired several families to donate dogs for military training, continuing the program that had brought Rex into service years earlier during the war. Mitchell completed his veterinary degree in 1950 and established a practice in Louisville, specializing in working dogs. Rex remained his constant companion and unofficial assistant, greeting clients and demonstrating training techniques for owners seeking to improve their dog's obedience and capabilities. Mitchell never charged veterans for services, remembering the bond he shared with Rex and wanting to honor military working dogs by caring for their descendants and relatives. His practice thrived as his reputation spread throughout Kentucky and neighboring states for expertise in working dog training and veterinary care. In 1953, Mitchell received an invitation to testify before Congress about military working dog programs and the need for formal recognition of their service. He traveled to Washington with Rex, now 12 years old, but still healthy and alert. Mitchell's testimony emphasized the life-saving contributions dogs made during the Pacific War and advocated for permanent military working dog programs rather than the ad hoc wartime approach. His recommendations influenced legislation that established formalized military working dog training centers and career fields for handlers within the armed forces structure. The Korean War demonstrated the validity of Mitchell's advocacy as military working dogs served with distinction in combat and security roles. Mitchell consulted with the Marine Corps on training protocols, traveling to bases to advise handlers and evaluate program effectiveness. Rex accompanied him on these trips, serving as a living connection to the World War II war dog program and inspiring younger handlers to build strong bonds with their partners. Mitchell always emphasized that the intelligence breakthrough on Peleliu resulted from trust and partnership rather than training alone. Rex passed away peacefully in 1956 at age 14, surrounded by Mitchell and his family. Mitchell buried him on the farm with full military honors, including a flag-draped casket and taps played by a local veteran. The grave marker identified Rex as Sergeant Rex USMC and listed his campaigns, Peleliu and Okinawa. Local newspapers published obituaries recognizing Rex's service and impact on military working dog programs. Mitchell grieved deeply, but found comfort knowing that Rex had lived a long, peaceful life after surviving the brutal Pacific campaigns that claimed so many human and animal lives. Mitchell continued his veterinary practice and advocacy work for decades, training hundreds of working dogs and advising military and law enforcement agencies on handler-dog partnerships. He never adopted another personal dog, considering Rex irreplaceable. Instead, he dedicated himself to improving the lives and recognition of all working dogs through his professional work and volunteer efforts. Mitchell received numerous awards from veterans organizations and animal welfare groups for his lifetime contributions to military working dog programs and the human-animal bond that made them effective. The intelligence documents Rex discovered on Peleliu were declassified in 1992 and donated to the National Museum of the Marine Corps. The display includes photographs of Mitchell and Rex, excerpts from the captured Japanese plans, and detailed explanations of how the intelligence enabled the decisive ambush that destroyed the enemy offensive. Millions of visitors have learned about the Doberman who heard danger, found buried plans, and changed the course of a battle through loyalty and training. Mitchell passed away in 2003 at age 81, remembered as a pioneer in military working dog advocacy. His legacy continues through training programs and recognition systems that honor the contributions of dogs like Rex, who served alongside their human partners with courage, dedication, and unwavering loyalty that saved countless lives during humanity's darkest conflicts.